Hey there, this is Jeff White, Life and Living Now, Personal Fighting Arts. I want to talk a little bit about a standing meditation and just a posture for that. We'll discuss a little bit about more what to do while you're in that posture, but I wanted to just kind of talk about the posture itself. It's very simple. However, we need to have a few nuanced changes within our posture to realize greater benefits from the standing meditation. Now, the standing meditation I first learned from martial arts, more the internal martial arts practices. Also was in Qigong, and I found it in a few other places. And it just is learning how to stand and be. Sounds simple until you realize your mind is constantly working. And how do we then harness that mind, begin to control that mind and our consciousness and utilize that to our benefit? So one of the first things that we learn to do is how to stand. All right? And this is for standing meditation. Now, those of you who follow on my Qigong class, we have, after certain flows, we'll do a standing meditation. And that's where this comes from. So I wanted to kind of go through the basics of that, and then we can kind of work on what to do while we're standing. But let's kind of take a look at it. So if we stand up, and when I'm standing, I like, move that back a little bit more. And we can't see my feet, but feet are about, you're going to look at structure. All this really is about what's a proper structure, so that I'm not trying to compensate. If I'm leaning too far forward, I'm trying to compensate. I can feel that in my back. Same thing if I'm, doodah man. If my feet are still out, too wide, well, I can feel the pressure on my hips. I can feel where it just doesn't really feel right. If I walk them in, now, if my legs are too close together, and I say that, I want to get to just a Wuji standing posture, but I will use this also in meditation and doing my Qigong. But for this posture, feet, legs under your shoulders, proper alignment and stance. Toes face forward. I mention that because I have a tendency to kind of spread my feet a little bit wider, but you want toes face forward, knees face forward. I recommend pulling the toes in, just kind of grab the earth just a little bit. You don't want to have a lot of tension here. You just want to feel where you just kind of grab that earth a little bit and still be able to relax. Now, I find it helpful. I have terrifically fallen arches and flat feet, so if I stand straight, they actually bend in a little bit, and I can feel, some of that pressure, say, on the inside of my knee. So I noticed that when I would pull my toes in a little bit, it would change the structure of my feet, distribute, because it raises the arches, and it then distributes that weight back along more the outside of my feet, the way that the body was intended. So, feet forward, legs under shoulders, knees slightly bent. You don't need to be real bent, but you don't want to be locked out. You just want to be bent. Hips, I want to straighten. We all have this curve into our spine. And so I want to drop my tailbone. I don't need to tuck it so that it feels abnormal. And once again, if I sense tension, correct it. Now, if I walk around like this with my butt out in the air, then this may feel weird, but this is not good. Puts a lot of pressure on lumbar. So I just tuck. Shoulders, remember the six, in martial arts, we're taught there are 6 harmonies, 3 external, 3 internal. The 3 external, of course, are shoulders, hips, elbows, knees, hand, feet. All right. So we're looking at shoulders. Drop your shoulders, roll them back naturally. Now I say roll them back. I recently had a shoulder issue. And I've dealt with my shoulder issues a lot. Started with heavy weightlifting. I moved into martial arts. I changed my weightlifting, but I was introduced to a shoulder Qigong moving meditation called Minzen. It came from the Bando martial arts community, and it's part of their internal power ideology and thoughts. And within karate, I've also seen it as teacup exercise. So Qigong will teach this as well. And it is wonderful, and I have used it to heal my shoulder every time that it has gotten kind of jacked up. A few months ago, I really jacked it up working downward diagonal elbows on a bag, and felt so awesome during the workout. And that night, I noticed that it was terrifically painful, and it never went away. So I did my Minzen, started working, and got it to about 90%. I still couldn't get it back 100%. So I decided to go get some PT. And so the doctor, when she looked at me, said, well, one thing we're going to address is your posture. And I'm going, okay, I'm not military, but I didn't think my posture was that bad. But she says, your shoulders are somewhat rounded. Now, granted, my shoulders have been rounded since I was that brooding, badass teenager that walks around with the hands, like this. And so I did that enough. Obviously, my shoulder had rolled forward. Now, I have one shoulder higher. I delivered paper as a paper boy as a kid, carried computer, bags, everything else on my shoulder. So this one's always been forward and rolled forward a little bit. So when we do that, it puts the shoulder into a more vulnerable position. So if we just roll it back, once again, it was shoulders over hips, all right, so they're in alignment. So if I'm stooped a little bit, I can't breathe as well, but also my shoulder moves in front of my hips. So I just want to drop it. And so this will give us more power when we come in. When I stand, now I was taught this as Wuji posture. I have also heard as preliminary posture, standing meditation, first posture or foundational posture. And it's just this. We're just sitting. We're just standing, excuse me. A lot of times now, classically, as I understand it, is back of palms are forward, and you have a little bit of space in your armpit. Not this. You can feel that in your shoulders. Just this. Now, I've also had teachers who were fine with palms in. I have done meditations with palms out. And the other standing that you'll probably recognize, standing meditation, is coming in here, and been known as Tai Chi, number of things, but just hugging trees, Zhanshuang, and what I'm doing is I'm still in my posture, knees bent, forward, tailbone dropped, shoulders relaxed in proper place, and if I flare my elbows out, eventually I'm going to get tired and they're going to drop, so elbows are down. This is the position. My hands are moved in about 30 degrees, and I can just hold that. Now, my chin, imagine if you just went yes, and you just kind of tuck your chin a little bit, that's what you're wanting to do. Why? It helps straighten this other curve. So we want to have that spine straight so that the signals go up and down. More importantly, as we get into meridians, kundalini, depending upon which paradigm we want to borrow from, energy runs up the spine. And so we want to have that, give it a nice clean course to run up. But when we stand, this is where we're standing. So whether you choose to stand here, 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 is up to you. I will change off. Later, you'll have a preference, and it may also be what you're trying to accomplish at the time. So that's standing in that posture. So what are we doing while we're standing there? Obviously, if all we're doing is figuring out what we're going to do the rest of the day, we're doing our shopping list, or we're thinking about the workout, or we're thinking about what we had for dinner, then we're not really maximizing the use of our time and space. So, and we kind of know that. I say that somewhat, facetiously, but the mind will, of course, run off on its own. It's what it has. It's how it's made. Now remember, I view us as we are spirits. We have a mind and emotions as tools. We exist in a body. They're all energetic. They're all various frequencies of energy. But we use the body, we use the mind as a tool. We are not our thoughts. We're the thinker of our thoughts. We're the witness of our thoughts. We're not our thoughts ourselves. And that's a very important distinction. Because if you're the thinker of your thoughts, then you don't need to be carried away by them. Far easier said than done. And remember, the mind is kind of also, we are made to take things in and generalize. We want to think constantly. We have associative memory responses. One thought has now associated with another thought out of our experience, which then brings us to another thought into our experience. And then suddenly we have a whole emotional event that can go on. But we're using these thoughts, and we kind of run away with these thoughts, and we think these thoughts are us. But they're not. We are the thinker of our thoughts, and so therefore we can put our minds in between our thoughts, and we can expand that gap, and we can have a more nuanced response. We can change our expression. We can see that, okay, maybe this was based upon some false information or information that may not necessarily apply here, but we are the automatic part of our brain assigned a relationship to it based upon past experiences that may or may not continue to be valid. We work through those. That's the part of the mindfulness meditation. That's part of your journey that you're working with at this point in time. So, but as you stand, well, the first thing I want you to do is just learn to stand and breathe and relax. That in itself can be your practice for years with incredible benefits. But first, just stand. So, spine relatively straight, not artificially, just naturally. Your pelvis is dropped, chin is tucked in. Imagining I have a string from the crown of my head pulling my spine up so everything's nice and erect, and I want to breathe. Deep diaphragmatic breathing. In through your nose. In this case, you can feel the belly push out. You can learn, the diaphragm's a muscle. You have to be able to exercise that. You can learn how to stretch it in different directions. So if I say breathe into my back, well, obviously I'm not breathing into my back, I breathe into my lungs. But the diaphragm, as it comes down, you can train it to push more towards the back. I can train it to push more towards the side or to the front. And so we begin to train the diaphragm to take deeper and deeper breaths as well. That in itself will activate parasympathetic nervous systems. It creates a very calm sensation. And so that's part of what you can just learn to breathe. Feel your breath. Forget about everything else. Yes, you just become one with your breath. You breathe in. You breathe out. You breathe in. You breathe out. When the mind wants to flit, bring the mind back to the breath. Will it want to flit? Oh, absolutely. But you're the thinker of your thought. So, train yourself to be that. You already are. Now you have to be aware of it. And you have to utilize it. You got to take that lesson with you. So just breathe. Feel any tension in your body. Now, sometimes when we're standing, and we're just standing and we're just focused on breath, the body will release that tension itself. There's times when I have felt like the other day I was standing and apparently I was holding more tension into my quads, into my hamstrings, and all of a sudden they just let go. And it just felt like all my energy dropped to the floor in my body. Not in a bad way, just very energetically. And I felt my root go deeper into the earth. It's like all of a sudden I sank and my energy went into the earth. Other times, if I'm holding stress, it's my right scapula. And usually also if it's stress I'm trying to, I'm repressing or I'm not in touch with. And yes, we still all have that. Then my right scapula, like, tighten up. For some people in their piriformis, they're deep into their glutes, into their hip, when it tightens up, it's repressed anger issues. And so you have to be able to learn to deal with those and put your mind in those places and relax. Now, there are times when you're doing this, you'll find that you may unlock emotional energetics, and all of a sudden, you might have this wave of anger, sadness, remorse. We tend to repress the negative things or things we don't want to deal with. So the good stuff, that's why, we don't always repress good feelings unless we perceive them as being bad. If we feel like we're not worthy of something good happens, we may repress that, or the feelings from that. But typically we repress those things that we don't want to face, and usually those are the unpleasantries. And so when we begin to unlock those through either massage, Qigong, awareness, then sometimes we'll get a revisit by some of those energies. Just sit with them. You don't need to act on them. You don't need to add to them. You don't need to take away from them, because that comes back to repression. Just sit with this. Had that happen the other day, out of the blue, all of a sudden I had this wave, and I kind of knew it was coming, because from my meditations, I could sense some things that I was unlocking, and I remember that thought came through, this is going to revisit you later. And sure enough, all of a sudden I had these waves of just despair, anger, just frustration, and I just sat with it. I just created some space, and I just sat with it. I did not add to them. I didn't try and figure out exactly what it was. I didn't try and go, oh yeah, that's what they did. That's why I was so angry. I didn't try and add to it and try and justify it. I just wanted to sit with that energy and that feeling. And it needs to just work its way out and dissipate. And it did. And then, short time later, perfectly fine, forgot about the whole thing. Until actually I sat down to talk about this. So when those feelings crop up, just don't add to them, don't take away from them, sit with them. Let them be. They will dissipate on their own, because you are the thinker of the thoughts. You are spirit. You have a mind and emotions as tools. You live in a body as a tool, but you are spirit. You are in control. So, coming back to our original point, when you sit, when you stand, now brings us to a point. Can I do this sitting? Yes, I can. The key is, don't lean back on your couch. I like having something to do with my meditation. I do sit where at least my hips are parallel with my knees. I prefer a little bit raised, because it moves, it takes away from having to drop the pelvis, and it kind of does that. It rotates that pelvic cradle all on its own, and then it's just in the back, and I sit and I breathe. Later, you can begin to direct your breath, as we talked about, working on with the diaphragm and our awareness of that. I will breathe into my lower dantian. The lower dantian is a elixir field, but I will use this to store as a storage place for energy. And I breathe in, and I create this energetic ball in my mind as I'm coming through here. And it will help build strength and grounding. You can think of, I look at spirit, soul, and body. So this is my lower dantian, middle dantian, upper dantian. Lower dantian will house, root chakra as well as sacral chakra, and I'm breathing energy in, and I'm kind of condensing it into the core part of my being, about 2 inches, inch and a half, 2 inches below the navel, more towards the spine. When I focus here, as I said, it builds strength, physical as well as mental, emotional strength. We'll use it in martial arts. We move from the center as well. But for our Qigong and for our non-martial experiences and benefits, it creates a huge sense of grounding. If I put my mind, as also I teach, into my heart, then it's more calming, more centered, and into spirit and ego, mind, and emotions. And it works with the heart chakra and the solar plex. Some would also say throat. The throat is your voice and your integrity. But as I'm moving into heart, there are some meditation practices that I used to do. This is all they said you put your mind in your heart, and then you lead energy up your spine, and then back down the back as well. Other than the third eye, with the crown chakra is going to be the upper dantian. Focusing there, it gives more spiritual power, insight, progress, evolution. Can you put your mind into more than one spot? The answer is yes, over time. You just have to train your awareness to do that. It's the same thing as when we're training in martial arts and we teach to punch, we're putting all of our effort into one punch. But as we begin to divide power, then we need to put our hands and be aware of everything that we're doing. It's the same thing. It's not difficult. It just takes training to do it, because you also want to stay relaxed. You do not want to have any of this amped up energy. I don't want any aggression. I want to be calm, relaxed. I want to use my intent. Now, it does not mean you can't be lively. I find, the peacefulness is not a slothful peacefulness. It's a vibrant peacefulness. So there is a vibrancy to spirit. There is a vibrancy to all of this. So I'm not just like, and I just sit and there's nothing that I want to do. I find this energizes me. All right. So can you focus on more than one spot? Yes. I tend to, of course, there's different practices when we teach with small circulation. I am imagining energy going down my front, gathered into my lower dantian. It moves around to my perineum, which is kind of like the meeting point between one channel and the next channel coming up in traditional Chinese medicine. So conception channel runs from about the mouth, the corners, comes down, runs around to the perineum, picks up on the governing channel, picks up from the perineum, the coccyx, runs up over the top of the head, and comes down to about your filter. You put your tongue at the roof of your mouth to connect the two channels. A lot of times, and I have taught and do teach this small circulation where I'm focusing and leading this energy around through my body. I also will focus on all the chakras, and sometimes in my meditation I'll focus on each chakra, working from the root chakra to the sacral, to solar plexus, to heart, to throat, to third eye, to crown chakra. Other times I will focus on activating all of those and just being aware of all of that energy. You also have nadis, chakras, energy centers all throughout your body. And other meditations, I will trace meridian lines through my body. Other times, I will focus on those other energy centers. These are all practices. Sometimes I'm looking at internal organs. These are all practices. But the initial practice, and the one that you want to use to build your awareness in your breath and your relaxation, is this standing posture. It is the foundational posture for most everything else that we want to do. So I would encourage you to go stand, go hug a tree. That's for tree hugger. So I like the standing, just the wuji. You'll find those postures that resonate with you, but understand certain postures do create certain benefits when you stand correctly and you use them over time. Now, you may experience something the very first time, you may not. All right? It is consistent practice that creates those experiences. I always, don't take my word on this. Don't take my word for any of this. Not that I don't believe fully in what I say. I always teach be a healthy cynic, is how I've approached all of this. Which means I don't just buy in because somebody said something, this was it, that this was truth, just because I read it in a book. I'll see how it aligns up. I will research. I will take it into account. And I will look to see, and if it aligns, great. If it doesn't align with my understanding, I don't toss it out. I put it on a shelf. Because sometimes I found that after I grew more and evolved more, then I looked at those principles. Now I understood them, whereas before I didn't. I just wasn't ready for me at that time. Perfectly fine. So grow with this. Listen to your mind. Listen to your body. Pay attention to it. Release the stress. Release any tension. Release tension from your body. Scan your body. Feel tension. If you feel it, let it go. The next thing is the tension in your mind. And that is always amazing to me. Where all of a sudden, I literally didn't think my mind was tense, but all of a sudden, my whole muscles in my face will drop, and I will just enter the space where everything is calm. I want to take that with me, and we do that through deep diaphragmatic breathing as we enter and go through our day. We do that with putting our mind into our heart, into our lower dantian, into our upper dantian. You can choose which ones that you do. And part of it depends upon your intent. A lot of this has to do with also your intent. What are you wanting to accomplish? And as you get more familiar with the different types of meditation, then you can use them as tools depending upon what it is that you are being led to feel like you need to accomplish in that point. You listen to you. You ultimately are your best teacher and guide for you. Now, it doesn't mean to run off willy-nilly. It doesn't mean to subscribe to all the crazy stuff that's out there. And with a lot of this internal stuff, there's some craziness that's out there. You have to find that balance. I always look for the combination of East and West. Have always been that way. I have looked at the West when they looked at medicine. They were, the West is very task-oriented. It's very young. It's very task-oriented. So, it goes after external things. Eastern medicine was much more preventative, much more yin, much more internal. Combine those two, and you have a more holistic understanding, and I think a better grasp. So, I encourage you to discover these things for yourself, research these things for yourself. Don't just take somebody's word, but practice. And you can read all the books that you want, and you read all the articles. Nothing takes the place of practice. And when you practice in earnest, you will guide yourself, your spirit. You will talk to you and let you know what your next steps are. So enjoy the journey. This is your journey. The teachers, and I love sharing, I love teaching, I love being a guide, but we're those who have gone before, and we shine a light on the path behind us for those who want to come. And that's what I do here. I laugh. I'm actually rather uncomfortable doing videos. I much prefer writing, but people don't read as much anymore. And I do find that people have enjoyed these videos, as awkward as I seem on them. So take what I'm saying and go practice. Go practice, go practice. Thank you. Have a great day.